What Camilla just realised behind closed doors is that a lifetime of strategic manoeuvring can be completely erased by a single signature on an administrative document. It happened without a public scene, without a single shouting match, and entirely out of view from the waiting press pack outside the palace gates. In a matter of minutes, an unmarked envelope containing a revised security and payroll audit arrived at her desk, turning her family's grand ambitions into a sudden case of stark commercial desperation. By the time the ink was dry, the illusion of her absolute power had vanished, leaving her to face the coldest institutional reckoning of her life. This is the story of how the British monarchy executes a silent, bloodless purge when a line has finally been crossed. Today we are going to unpack the quiet, systemic counter-offensive launched by Prince William, a tactical masterclass that targeted the one thing Camilla believed she had, securely under her control the financial and physical assets of the royal estate. We will reveal the secret paper trail she attempted to establish for her non-royal children, how William uncovered the staggering exploitation of crown property, and the precise moment the trap snapped shut, leaving Camilla to realize that despite the crown on her head, she legally owns nothing. To understand how devastating this blow truly is, we have to look back at the 30-year game that brought her to this peak. For decades, Camilla played the long game, moving with a patient, calculated persistence that outlasted public outrage, political resistance, and the enduring shadow of Princess Diana's legacy. Step by step, she transformed herself from the most hated woman in Britain into the anointed Queen Consort, rewriting the internal narrative of the family and carefully positioning her own inner circle within the machinery of the court. It was a masterclass in institutional survival, driven by an assumption that once King Charles ascended the throne, her position would be completely untouchable. Over the first few years of the new reign, that illusion of absolute power only grew stronger. Visitors to the palace noticed subtle but profound shifts. Old portraits of Princess Diana quietly moved into deep storage, the systematic sidelining of courtiers who remembered the old days, and the growing, unmistakable presence of Camilla's non-royal children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, at state-adjacent events. Camilla operated with the confidence of someone who believed she had successfully rewritten the rules of succession, establishing an alternative power base inside the institution that relied entirely on her total control over the king. But the illusion of absolute power often breeds a dangerous kind of overreach. What began as an innocent inclusion of her family in private gatherings slowly evolved into a systematic attempt to leverage the royal brand for private commercial gain. Behind the scenes, a series of seemingly minor proposals began circulating through the palace's administrative channels, aiming to grant her family long-term, low-cost leases on key crown properties and to secure lucrative consulting agreements tied to the management of royal estates. Her son Tom, a prominent food writer, began expanding his commercial ventures with projects that increasingly relied on the prestige, the suppliers, and the historic weight of the royal name. It was a quiet effort to institutionalize her children's presence within the financial architecture of the monarchy, ensuring they would be provided for long after the current reign came to an end. This ambitious strategy was born out of a deep-seated commercial desperation, a sudden panicked realization that while Camilla held the highest title in the land, her personal wealth was entirely dependent on a husband whose time on the throne was inherently limited. Without an independent financial foundation anchored in the crown estates, her family would be pushed back to the margins of the aristocracy the moment the crown passed to the next generation. The fatal flaw in this plan was an absolute underestimation of the Prince of Wales and his control over the Duchy of Cornwall. When King Charles ascended the throne, the multi-billion-dollar corporate empire of the duchy passed immediately to William. Unlike his father, who viewed the estate through the lens of personal philosophy and traditional stewardship, William approaches the duchy with the cold, data-driven discipline of a modern chief executive officer. He does not view royal property as a personal playground or a family favor bank. He views it as a sovereign trust that requires absolute financial integrity. That detail matters because it was within the modern automated auditing systems of the duchy that the paper trail began to unravel. A routine quarterly review flagged an unusual series of inquiries regarding land use permissions, vendor contracts, and long-term lease structures within the estate's boundaries. These were not standard agricultural requests. They were sophisticated administrative maneuvers designed to create permanent commercial footholds for outside entities associated with Camilla's inner circle. What looked to the casual observer like routine administrative updates was actually a quiet, coordinated attempt to carve out an empire within an empire. When William was presented with the audit, he did not confront his stepmother, nor did he initiate a dramatic family confrontation. Instead, he chose the path of weaponized restraint, initiating a total forensic review of every administrative request submitted by the Queen's office over the preceding 12 months. For William, this was not a simple matter of palace politics. It was a direct threat to the institutional integrity of the monarchy, a staggering exploitation of public trust, and an insult to the memory of his mother, who had suffered under the same calculated maneuvering decades earlier. The retaliation was executed with the terrifying silent efficiency of a corporate restructuring, utilizing his absolute legal authority as the head of the Duchy of Cornwall. William quietly signed a directive that established an immediate financial blockade. Security clearances for non-royal visitors to specific private sectors of the estates were permanently revoked. Prominent members of Camilla's family, who had previously moved through these exclusive spaces with total freedom, arrived to find the gates literally locked, informed by polite but unyielding security staff that they now required formal written permission from the prince's office just to enter the grounds. Simultaneously, the financial trap snapped shut on the commercial ventures themselves. An ironclad directive was issued to the palace finance committees, freezing any proposed budgets, partnerships, or consulting fees linked to outside brands associated with her children. The administrative loophole she had spent months opening was welded shut in a single afternoon. It was a masterclass in institutional erasure carried out entirely through the ruthless application of protocol. William did not need to shout. He simply let the architecture of the state do the screaming for him. The true horror of the situation dawned on Camilla late one evening when she realized the full scope of her isolation. Sitting in her private apartments looking over the revised, heavily restricted operational boundaries of the estate, she picked up the phone to appeal to the one person who had always protected her, the king. But as the line rang out unanswered, she was met with a devastating, unnatural silence that changed the reading of everything. Charles, the man for whom she had spent 30 years rewriting history, did not intervene. The realization hit her with absolute clarity that she was trapped, holding the crown, but stripped of the power while her stepson watched from the shadows. That unanswered telephone line did not signify a temporary marital disagreement. It represented something far more permanent, a systemic shift in the gravitational center of the British monarchy. For 30 years, King Charles had been Camilla's ultimate shield, willing to defy public opinion, political advisors, and even his own mother to secure her place at his side. But that is where the story changes. Faced with a forensic ironclad audit from the Prince of Wales, the king chose the survival of the institution over the commercial ambitions of his wife's family. Charles understood what Camilla failed to realize: a monarch cannot fight a war against the person who controls the future of the estate, especially when that person holds all the legal and financial cards. To understand the sheer scale of Camilla's isolation, one must look closely at the devastating contrast of schadenfreude that now defines her position. To the outside world, she is a queen adorned in historic jewels, riding in state carriages and presiding over magnificent banquets. But behind that billionaire public relations facade lies a stark, broke reality. What looked like a routine administrative update from the Prince of Wales was actually a total dismantling of her empire. Legally, the Queen Consort owns absolutely nothing within the royal infrastructure. She does not own Buckingham Palace, she does not own Windsor Castle, and she does not possess an independent sovereign revenue stream that survives past the current reign. That detail matters because the true financial engine of the family is the Duchy of Cornwall, a vast portfolio of land, real estate, and investments that belongs exclusively to the Prince of Wales. When William assumed control of the duchy, he did not just inherit wealth, he inherited absolute executive authority over the family's economic future. William acted not because of a petty desire for domestic dominance, but because he recognized a pattern of staggering exploitation that threatened the long-term credibility of the crown. By implementing an immediate financial blockade, William effectively reminded his stepmother that her family's presence in these historic spaces was a temporary privilege, not an inherited right. This financial reality has triggered a profound state of commercial desperation within Camilla's inner circle. For months, her children had been quietly positioning themselves to leverage their proximity to the throne, treating the royal estate as a launch pad for private business ventures and long-term consulting agreements. They operated under the assumption that a mother with a crown could guarantee permanent access to the wealth of the monarchy. But when William signed the directive, freezing those proposals and locking the gates to the private sectors of the estate, that assumption shattered. Her son's ambitious commercial projects, which relied heavily on the prestige and resources of the royal brand, were instantly starved of their institutional oxygen. The execution of this blockade has exposed the hollow nature of Camilla's 30-year game. She had successfully erased past narratives, outmaneuvered her rivals, and placed her allies in key positions within the court. Yet all of that structural manipulation was rendered useless by a simple application of protocol. Without a personal financial foundation anchored in the Crown estates, her family is entirely vulnerable, facing the terrifying prospect of being pushed back to the margins of the aristocracy the moment the current reign ends. When she looks into the future, she no longer sees a lasting dynasty for her children. She sees a cold, certain eviction executed by a stepson who has forgotten nothing. As Camilla's influence recedes behind the closed doors of the palace, a new order is quietly and seamlessly taking its place. It is an order defined by the restoration of a legacy that Camilla spent decades trying to obscure. Observers inside the court have already begun to notice subtle but unmistakable shifts in the daily operations and visual landscape of the monarchy. Portraits that had been quietly moved into storage are returning to their proper places. And traditions that honour the memory of Princess Diana are being subtly woven back into the fabric of state occasions. This is the quiet, unstoppable ascension of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, whose uncomplaining sacrifice and absolute institutional loyalty stand in sharp contrast to the commercial ambitions of the Parker Bowles family. Every protocol change, every revoked security pass, and every modified guest list serves as a psychological clue to this shifting power dynamic. William and Catherine are no longer just the future of the monarchy, they are its current regulators. By using the rigid architecture of the state to dismantle Camilla's alternative power base, William has executed a masterclass in weaponized restraint, proving that the most devastating revenge is the kind delivered through an unmarked envelope and an automated administrative system. Camilla is left to occupy a crown that feels increasingly heavy, sitting in rooms she does not own, waiting for a future she can no longer control. The grand illusion has finally dissolved, leaving behind the stark reality of institutional survival. The British monarchy has survived for centuries, not by indulging the personal ambitions of its consorts, but by ruthlessly protecting its sovereign integrity. As the shadows lengthen over the royal estates, the silent warfare continues. Fought not with shouting matches in grand hallways, but with the cold, unyielding precision of the law. What do you think about Prince William's silent financial blockade and the sudden isolation of Queen Camilla? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and consider subscribing to the channel as we continue to follow and analyse the deep-seated power dynamics shaping the future of the British royal family.